Hello everybody, and welcome to this tutorial series on the FlightFactor 777V2. In this series, we'll be taking the airplane all the way from cold and dark all the way up to shutdown. So we'll be doing a full flight and a proper long haul as well, just to get the idea of how this airplane is supposed to operate. We'll not be going over every single detail, but we'll be trying to cover all the different bases of all the different features that we expect people to use, or if you don't want to use them, of course, absolutely not mandatory, but we'll try to cover as much as we can. And so I would say let's go ahead and get this plane powered up. So welcome to the flight deck of the 777V2. And you can see that the airplane is currently powered down, which means we need to do the electrical power up supplementary procedure, something that doesn't happen too often, but of course in the simulators they tend to be down. So let's go ahead and apply that supplementary procedure, and let's do the following. We're going to go to the overhead, and we're going to start with the electrical panel. We're going to turn on the battery switch. Once that is done, we need to verify that the hydraulics are all set off. We're checking that the C1 and C2 electric pumps are in the off position, which they are, and that all 4 demand pumps are also in the off position. I want to verify that both wiper switches are in the off position. We're going to head down and verify that the landing gear lever is down. And then we're going to check that the alternate flaps selector as well as push button are both off, which they are. Back on the overhead, we're going to verify that the left and right bus side switches are in the auto position. And then once that is checked, we can apply AC power. There are 2 methods which we can use, either the APU or the external power. Typically speaking, you always start with external power simply because the APU does use fuel. It also is very loud and it is not very good for the environment, and there are some airports that obviously restrict the use of the APU. So we will start the APU around 5 minutes prior to pushback. So let's apply the external power. First, we're going to apply the primary. Just note the primary is on the right side. So we're going to apply the primary external power. And then if the secondary is available, which it is, we'll also apply the secondary external power. And with that, the airplane should be powering up. And that this is the time to just wait until all the systems are booted, all the display units are available, the FMC is available, and you would also make sure that the GPS is available. If there is one thing you want to do in the meantime, you can definitely tune the interior lighting. So if it was nighttime or anything like that, this is a good time to play around with the brightness of everything, the integrity lights, the floodlights, and anything else you desire. Alright, so the aircraft is powered up, which means we are done with the electrical power up, and we can continue with the preliminary pre-flight procedures. So once the aircraft is powered up, we can continue with certain flows that we need to do and certain items we want to check off as early as possible. So first things first, the ADRU switch we're going to select on so that the IRS systems can align. The voice recorder will also select to on, and this is where we then would check the technical state of the airplane. So we can check a technical log. We do have, for example, the MEL that we can check. However, just note that just because it's red doesn't necessarily mean it's actually broken. We have, for example, the engine-driven generator switches or systems are red in this case, but really the reason they are red is because they're not running at the moment. So just keep that in mind. But everything else that is white or blue means it should be working perfectly fine. So you can use this as a technical state of the airplane in case something is broken. Yellow means it's just probably not selected on, so that should be fine as well. And there we go. So I don't see anything that is abnormal here. It means I think the aircraft is in a good technical state. This is something you can use as your technical log if you wanted to, because there's currently no technical log in here. But yeah, you can check the minimum equipment list. Next, we'll check the engine oil quantities. We want to verify that no low indications apply so that we don't need to refill. We'll go to the status page and we'll check the same thing with the hydraulic quantities. as well as the crew oxygen. We'll also check the time, make sure that the UTC time is correct, and in this case it is. If not, we would have to call maintenance to check why that is the case. We'll set the parking brake and verify that the pressure here is sufficient. So we'll check the brake source, and we want at least 1000 psi. We can see it's just on the edge, which is just about enough. However, if we feel uncomfortable and we want to refill the accumulator pressure or the accumulator, we can do so by supplying hydraulic pressure to the right system. So we can just select the right electrical pump to auto, and this should fill up. Of course, in the real airplane, you would verify with the ground personnel that what you're about to do is fine, that nobody's working around anything that is hydraulically powered, so that we don't cause any injury. So you know what, let's go ahead and do so. So we need to establish communication with two different sources that we're going to communicate with, which is one, of course, the ground crew, and the other part is the cabin crew. Let's go ahead and establish communication. We're going to go to the third MCDU here. We're going to go to cabin interphone, and we can already call the purser because we're on the cabin. We need to verify that we are on the with the ACP, that we have the correct option selected. So I'm tuning my cabin, my audio volume as well, and I have selected my mic to cabin as well, which means I can contact the purser. Let's go ahead and do so. And then once the purser has come in contact, you'll see the symbol appear, and we can now ask her to do all the different kinds of things that we need her to do. But for now, we just wanted to establish communication, so we're going to go ahead and end the call. And we need to do the same thing with the ground crew. We're going to use flight for that. Like mic, go to ground crew. Once communication established, you will see the indicator here, and we can then request all kinds of ground services. So now that we've established communication and they've told us go ahead and pressurize the hydraulics, it's no problem. We're going to go ahead and do so. So let's go ahead and pressurize the right hydraulic demand pump, or select it to auto. You see the fault light extinguish, and then you will also see the accumulator pressure slowly rise. Should be about 3000 psi. Once that's done, I'm going to go and select it back to off, and now we have sufficient brake pressure, which we don't need to worry about. The first officer would also do some other checks. So if the broadband switch, for example, would be in here, he would check that that is guarded, and we'd also arm the emergency exit lights. Since we have established ground communications with the ground personnel, I do want to request one thing. So let's go ahead and go back to the ground call.
I am here.
Wonderful. Because we're using the ground power unit and not the APU, it is rather chilly currently here in Frankfurt, and we can see that the temperatures here are also not quite the warmest, and we want to warm up the cabin just prior to the passengers coming on board so that they feel comfortable. Since, again, like I said, we're using the external power and not the APU, and since we don't have an actual bleed source, we need to connect the air conditioning cards. So let's go ahead and request those. We're going to start with number 1.
Ground, we need some equipment connected.
What can I bring you?
Left ground AC unit.
Of course, sir. Any other requests?
Yes.
I wouldn't say no.
And
Any other requests?
air conditioning too. And then after
Not
that,
at the moment.
no. Wonderful. So he's going to connect those two, and then hopefully the cabin should warm up nicely just prior to boarding. For that extra realism, if we are connecting the air conditioning card, it is required to have the pack switches off and the recirculation fans off as well, which they are in this case. So we're going to also keep that in mind when doing our pre-flight procedures. So next up, we're going to go over to the menu of the EFB, and we're going to set up our flight plan. So let's go to external services, Navigraph services. This is where you can insert your SimBrief username, and then we're going to select get data from SimBrief. Wonderful. We can go to the briefing directly, or let's just go back to the menu, and I want to go back to the external services. I want to go to ACARS CPDLC. I'm going to put in my call sign here, which today is United 772. Okay, my Hobby logon code in case you guys want to use CPDLC, and then we're going to select connect to ACARS CPDLC. and then we're going to do that as well, so that we can use those services if we needed to. Let's go to the ident page, and normally you would check, make sure that the aircraft model is correct, the tail ID is checked, the date is correct, the time is correct, and that nothing is abnormal, and that there are no faults. And if there are, we would acknowledge them. If they are faults that we can work with, we'd select the initialize flight, and then we can go to terminal charts if you guys have the Navigraph linked up, and we can apply those as well. So we're going from Frankfurt over to Newark. Wonderful. And we're going to select complete, and then we can select all the different charts we need for today. We can go edit clip, and then we can clip all the different charts we would require for today's flight. So I'm going to clip all the departure briefings, page down. So we have the airport, taxi overview. We don't need the A380 or 747 restrictions. Then I'm going to set the departures, RNAV departure. Today's departure is the Oboka 5 Sierra. There it is. I'm going to set that. Then arrival, in case we need to return, I'm actually going to select an ILS runway 25 left as my return, just in case. I always want to plan ahead, so I'm going to use ILS 25 left. And then I'm going to select complete, and then I'm going to have all of my flipped charts here. I can do the same thing for my destination, for any of my alternates that I have, and so on and so forth. So normally this is a time point where you would review all of these charts. We're not going to do this in this video. I'm going to spare you the time, and we're going to continue to the next part. Of course, this is also something that is done parallel by the first officer as well. So you guys do this kind of about the same time. But we're going to go back. We're actually going to go to menu, and we're going to calculate some performance figures just to see, can we even depart today? And we're going to start with inserting our departure. Frustrating, we'll go over everything here in a moment. So runways, we're taking runway 25 center today. Our condition is good because I can see it's starting to rain, and we insert our wind, outside air temperature, QNH, and so on and so forth. Now, how do I get this information? There are different methods. If you are on VATSIM and you've connected yourself to ACARS/CPTLC, so you have a HOPI connection, you can go down here in the COM page. You can go to flight information, ATIS request, there we go, and then you can insert, for example, Frankfurt, send the request, and if you get a message, go to new messages, open the page, and then you'll get your ATIS or whatever. In this case, there is no ATIS available, so we're not going to have anything. So I didn't get an ATIS, but I can still get some weather information through the METAR or TAF. So I can go to flight information, do a TWIP request, and then I just insert the airport that I want that weather data from, send it off, and then with the new messages I should get the available information and METAR as well. So there's another method we can go. We can go to the EFB again. We're going to go to menu. We're going to go to our briefing, weather, and we can check what the weather is here depending on our briefing. So we can see our winds are 170 at Niner with light showers and rain, QNH 1016, temperature 10 degrees, dew point Niner. So let's go ahead and do that. And to make it easier for me, I'm going to go ahead and go EFB, show EFB2. I'm going to display that information on my second EFB, and then I'm going to go to the performance and apply all that data here. So 170 at Niner, outside air temperature is 10 degrees, QNH 1016. Now typically speaking, when you do these kinds of calculations, you tend to go with the worst case scenario. The worst case scenarios is always higher temperatures and lower QNHs. So that's what we're going to do, is we're going to put 1 degrees higher on the temperature for Celsius and 1 hectopascal lower here. Then we're going to go with thrust training takeoff, flaps 5, and AC, anti-ice off. We don't require it today, although it is very close to requiring it. So let's go and plan with it just in case. We can also apply MELs if we needed to, but our airplane is in good condition. I'm going to apply my maximum takeoff weight here because we're trying to figure out can we even do that. And I'm going to use a default CG of 25. Let's go ahead and calculate that, and let's see if we can take off with 650,000 pounds if we needed to. And indeed we can. Our performance limiting takeoff weight is 650, 364 pounds. That gives us an EPR of 1.52, and even gives us an assumed temperature, and our V speeds, flaps 5, this is all checked. If not, you would manipulate these values until you get something that is plausible, until you get your maximum takeoff weight. This is what the whole point of this is trying to figure out what can we take off with. The planned weights, if we go to back to the briefing and we go to weights, we can check what our actual weight is expected to be. That is, our takeoff weight is expected to be 530. So if we go down and we verify, we can see that we are well below our maximum takeoff weight today, or which is 120,000 pound difference, which is good, which means we shouldn't have any problems taking off today. Another thing that we would also check and verify are the NOTAMs, which we can check via the briefing and NOTAMs tab. We would check to see if there's anything that applies to us today, any special procedures we may need to consider, or anything that is broken, for example VOR stations, or any kind of departures that are not in use, or any taxiways, so we can plan ahead the expected taxi routing for the departure briefing, things like that. And the same thing goes for the destination. So we have checked many of the required items, and we think that the airplane is in a good condition, that we can continue, and we are happy to start fueling the airplane, as well as potentially boarding here after that, after the cabin crew is also ready with their checks and so on and so forth. So the first thing I want to do, because that can take a little while, is I want to fuel the airplane. So how do I do that? Well, there are a couple of methods, and I think the best method that you can use is we're going to go back to the menu, we're going to go to airplane, we're going to go to loading service, and here we can see the different types of loading services that we will require. We go back and we go to weight and balance. We can fill from SimBrief, and this is where we'll use the simplified zero fuel weights, but we can also deselect this, and we can then individually select how much we want. However, you can see that since I selected fill from SimBrief, it kind of already filled in anything it needed to. Dealing with the cargo load, let's fill that in, and the fuel load as well. For the fuel load, since that is what we want to do next, I want to manipulate this value just a little bit. I want to have 150,000 pounds today due to weather or potential holding, things like that. And then I'm going to go back, go to loading page, and then I'm going to see how much we need to load. We need to load 95 passengers, 2,134 pounds of catering, 19,000, about 20,000 pounds of cargo, and 150,000 pounds of fuel. So I'm going to go ahead and select load fuel.
You may fuel now.
We are fueling you, sir.
There we go. So this will automatically communicate with the ground personnel and request for fueling. And you can see that waiting for fuel truck on left, right, wing, so on and so forth. And then what we're going to do is I'm also going to request a fuel sample, which will come in handy later in cruise.
We request a fuel freeze test.
Most assuredly. As usual, expect the answer within a few hours over CPDLC.
Much appreciated.
Next, we're also going to request catering at this time.
Please start loading the catering.
By all means.
There we go, and the catering truck will also come. If you wanted to simulate this through the cabin call, you could do that by selecting the proper mic, by calling to a certain person, and then selecting the option you want. For the ground crew, that would be the left and right fuel truck. For the purser, that would be just catering. So now that these are going or underway, we can continue with our next steps. Now, as a quick intervention, there will be times where the ground personnel or the purser will contact you and letting you know that certain items have been completed or are ready to go. And in this case, it happened with both. So we are currently being called. You can see the call light as well on the ACP. We're being called by the ground personnel and the cabin crew, and whichever we want to select first. I'm going to go ahead and go to the ground personnel first, and we can see the call queue. We're going to select ground.
There should be enough fuel for you now. It's done.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Let's check. Indeed, 150,000 pounds. Wonderful. And the purser is calling us, so let's go ahead and select cabin.
Captain, catering is now loaded.
Much appreciated.
Perfect. So we've checked with, or they checked in with us, telling us that certain things are ready and completed, and we've said thank you. And this is where this comes in. So if you ever get like a certain call, like a ping, check your cabin interphone, see what kind of queues you have, and then answer them. So now that we've done the base items where we can start fueling and we can start catering, now we need to get some other things quickly checked before we can start boarding. Of course, the cabin crew in real life would also do some things we would have to discuss if we're ready or not, and what kind of things we can expect, which is not going to be part of this simulation, of course. But there's some things that we can do in here as well, which are generally first flight of the day items. So these are items that you don't need to do for every flight necessarily, especially if you're doing connection flights. Of course, with long haul flights, that's going to be a little bit different. This is probably going to be your only flight with this airplane for the day. So technically, it is always going to be checked, right? So you could do a PA system test, technically speaking. In the real world, you would do that. Make sure that the PA works. There's no test in here, but you can see if we select PA, you can do some different PA announcements, which we'll try to get in the tutorial video as well if you want. And do a cabin safety briefing, things like that. And we can also do a flight deck access system check. Now, this is something that is done mostly in passenger airplanes. In cargo airplanes, this is not really required to do. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to open the cargo door, and we're going to select the flight deck access system switch to off. We then check, sorry if it's loud, we need to go to auto, by the way. We need to go to auto, and we need to verify that the lock fail light illuminates. Then we go back to guarded, so normal, and if we check, the light extinguishes. That is a successful test so far. Now what we need to do is we need to go out here, close the door, and we need to insert our emergency code, which by default is 1455. Click enter. You can see this turns orange, and we can see that the auto unlock light illuminates. Normally in the airplane here as well, you would get a ping as well. So you would get a visual cue, a audible cue, and then we're just going to check that deny works. So we select deny, we can see the light extinguishes, and the door cannot be opened. Then we can select unlock again, we can technically open the door. Now in the FlightFactor, just keep in mind that if you start to look away, the door automatically closes anyway, so there's nothing you can do with it staying open. But that's how that flight deck access system check works. We're just checking that the lights work, that the manipulation works, things like that. And it does. It works wonderfully. If you want to change the access code to the cockpit door, you can do so as well by going into simulation, equipment and structure, and here you can see the cockpit door code, and you can insert that here as you desire, and that will reflect on the panel itself as well. You'd also check, of course, the flight deck emergency equipment, make sure all the flight documents are on board that are required for this flight, that are legally required for this flight. And then we can also go to the aft overhead, make sure that all the guards are closed, make sure that our cargo temperature selectors are as required. We don't have any pets or anything like that, anything living on board, so we can leave these at low, or we can even turn them off if we needed to, and just check that everything is in its right positions. First officer would also select the nav light on and the logo light as required, either in low visibility conditions or at nighttime. Check the circuit breakers, of course, make sure they're all in. And the other thing that would be checked is the crew rest, make sure that all the emergency equipment there is also available, which we cannot check here, unfortunately. If you were in the freighter, you would also check special items such as the courier seats, the galley equipment, and water waste levels, which is something the cabin crew would do in a normal case. This is now the final time. Now that we've checked all of that and we have communicated with the cabin crew, this is the time where we can actually start boarding. The airplane is in a good condition. We are ready for the passengers to come on board, and we can now communicate that to the gate agents. So we are going to go back to the airplane loading service, right? And we can request to load passengers, and we can request to load cargo. Let's go ahead and do both.
Go ahead and board the passengers.
Of course, we'll start immediately.
Go ahead and load the aircraft.
Sure I can.
Wonderful. So now that all services are being done, we can continue with our pre-flight procedures. Of course, if time permits, you would not wait until boarding started and then do your pre-flight procedures. You would do all the procedures you can as fast as you can, and then whenever time permits, start the boarding or loading process. So, during the pre-flight procedures, a lot of things happen at the same time. Of course, during the preliminary stuff as well, but normally it's in unison with each other, and a lot of the same things are done together. Here now we're starting to really go our separate ways. We need to make sure who is the pilot flying, who is the pilot monitoring, things like that, which is also something we would discuss very early on. So, the next step that would be now going on simultaneously is the pilot flying would now do the FMC or the CDU pre-flight, and the pilot monitoring would do the walk around. So what we're going to do, because we need to separate those, the next tutorial part will be all about the FMC, what we would do in the pre-flight with the FMC as the pilot flying, and then part 3 will be the continuation of the pre-flight procedures, where we then do the walk around, which we're going to do the really quick version of, and we'll do the rest of the pre-flight procedures as required as well. So with that said, we will see you guys in the CDU pre-flight tutorial of this series. See you in a sec.